I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. In this episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, I'm going to be reading an article from The Conversation, and it's an unexpected addition to my 2021 series on science communicators. This particular article is proposing that what if climate scientists were to declare a moratorium on further climate science as is presented in the COP meetings? What if they were to propose a moratorium, no more science, until relevant action is taken by corporations and governments around the world? Hi there. This is Dean Walker from the Poetry of Predicament podcast and livingresilience.net website. And this is another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast as a YouTube channel. And this is also a long-awaited extra episode of what I did last year as a series of podcast episodes in which I focused on science communicators. And I made up a scale entirely subjective. And I pointed out a few of my favorite science communicators and a few of my least favorite science communicators. You might remember that I started the series out by speaking about the whole concept of net zero, which was covered just beautifully and powerfully by a handful of climate scientists who were speaking in an article in theconversation.com. Website does a tremendous job whenever they put out an article. Well, you'll see, I'm going to be putting up images during this. I'm going to be reading you an article that I'm just stunned at the quality of this article. And I'm also stunned by how it matches something that I was predicting. Certainly I was experiencing it years ago, but I was wondering, basically, how long would it take for climate scientists to grow weary of providing all the details, all the data, all the projections, and reaffirming them every year and having them completely ignored, and in fact facing an increase of our human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems, including climate change, for the past now 26 plus years, at least since the COP meetings have been happening. I've just literally wondered how long will it take before they start to gag on their own repetitious work, and they're being ignored as completely as they are by media, by government, by corporations, by anybody who could actually do something about it. And so this article goes straight to that. So I'm thrilled that this level of truth-telling is happening somewhere. And so again, my hat is off to The Conversation. So again, I'll be putting up little excerpts, little pieces of what I'm reading, including especially the beautiful graphic that's in the middle of this thing. But it's called Scientists Call for a Moratorium on Climate Change Research Until Governments Take Real Action. It was posted January 10th here in 2022. And as you'll notice, I've got the graphic up about the authors, and that's one thing that The Conversation does really well, is they'll put disclosure statements from each of the scientists who are part of writing a given article. So you can see that I'm going to massacre the names here. Please bear with me. Bruce Glasovich, I'm imagining, from Massey University. Ian White, professor of environmental planning from University of Waikato. And Tim Smith, professor and ARC future fellow, University of the Sunshine Coast, which sounds to me like it's over in Canada, in BC. So, I just really have a great respect for not only these authors, but also, again, the folks at The Conversation who put out this quality of article and backs it up with lovely graphics and disclosure statements and so on. Something really missing in the vast majority of articles today, and the glut that's available on the internet at any given moment. So let's begin. Decades of scientific evidence demonstrate unequivocally that human activities jeopardize life on Earth. Dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system compounds many other drivers of global change. Governments concur, the science is settled, but governments have failed to act at a scale and pace that is required. What should climate change scientists do? There's an unwritten social contract between science and society. Public investment in science is intended to improve understanding about our world and support beneficial societal outcomes. However, for climate change, the science-society contract is now broken. The failure to act decisively is an indictment on governments and political leaders across the board, but climate change scientists cannot be absolved of responsibility. As we write in an article about this conundrum, and of course they give links throughout in wherever they mention other articles, as we write in an article about this conundrum, the tragedy is the compulsion to provide ever more evidence when the phenomena are well understood and the science widely accepted. The tragedy is being gaslighted into thinking the impasse is somehow our fault. Again, these are the voices of the three scientists who authored this article. The tragedy is being gaslighted into thinking the impasse is somehow our fault and we need to do science differently, crafting new scientific institutions, strategies, collaborations, and methodologies. Yet global carbon dioxide emissions are 60% higher today than they were in 1990, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published its first assessment. At some point, we need to recognize the problem is political and that further climate change science may even divert attention away from where the problem truly lies. As you can see here, I'm providing for you the really beautiful graphic that they put together for this article. I'll let you go ahead and read through it while I'm reading the next few paragraphs, and it'll be up for a while. So, just feel free to check it out. Gives you a sense of this timeline, since approximately the early 70s to this present day, just what has gone on, how much action has taken place. Was COP26 too little, too late? The outcome of COP26, summarized in the draft Glasgow Climate Pact, includes some progress, including an agreement to begin reducing coal-fired power, removing subsidies on other fossil fuels, and a commitment to double adaptation finance to improve climate resilience for countries with the lowest incomes. But many of the world's leading scientists argue that this is too little too late. They note the failure of COP26 to translate the 2015 Paris Agreement into practical reality to keep global warming below 1.5 C above pre-industrial levels. Even if COP26 commitments are fulfilled, there's a strong likelihood that humanity and life on Earth face a precarious future. So this, if I can just nudge in a comment here, this is, very typical of climate scientists across the board. They try and temper their comments and don't want to say anything too pointed or make too strong a projection for fear of being called alarmist. And that, of course, has been the plague on them, the pox on them for more than a decade now. What are climate change scientists to do in the face of this evidence? We see three possible options, two that are untenable, one that is unpalatable. Where to from here for climate change scientists? The first option is to collect more evidence and hope for action. Continue the IPCC process that stays politically neutral and abstains from policy prescriptions. A recent editorial in Nature called on scientists to do just that, stay engaged, to support future climate COPs. However, this choice not only ignores the complex relationship between science and policy, it runs counter to the logic of our scientific training to reflect and act on the evidence. We know why global warming is happening and what to do. We have known for a long time. Governments just haven't taken the necessary action. In a recent Nature survey, 6 in 10 of the IPCC's scientists who responded expect 3C warming above pre-industrial levels by 2100. Persisting with this first option is therefore untenable. Again, I want to mention the incredible conservative projection that's involved in this last paragraph. 3C by 2100, I think it would not be difficult to find hundreds, if not thousands, of articles and projections from strong sources that say that we will reach 3C far before 2100. So let's move on to that second option. The second option is more intensive social science research and climate change advocacy. As Harvard historian Naomi Oreskes recently observed, the work of IPCC's Working Group 1, which works on the physical science basis of climate change, is complete and should be closed down. In other words, they've done enough work. They've got the year after year, they've just validated the same conclusions over and over. Attention needs to focus on translating this understanding into action, which is the realm of Working Group 2. And that particular working group focuses on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. And also, Oreskes is suggesting to shift the focus to Working Group 3, and their work is to focus on mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, actual mitigation strategies and policy suggestions. In parallel, growing numbers of scientists are getting involved in diverse forms of advocacy, including nonviolent civil disobedience. So here I'm posting a tweet of some of those scientists and their activity their activism in Glasgow around COP26. However, albeit more promising than option one, there's little evidence of impact thus far, and it is doubtful this pathway, that pathway being activism, will lead to the urgent transformative actions required. This option is also not tenable. Halt on IPCC work until governments do their part. The third option is much more radical, but unpalatable, says these three scientists who have authored this article. We call for a moratorium on climate change research that does little more than document global warming and maladaptation. Attention needs to focus on exposing and renegotiating the broken science-society contract. Given the rupture to the contract outlined here, we call for a halt on all further IPCC assessments until governments are willing to fulfill their responsibilities in good faith and mobilize action to secure a safe level of global warming. This option is the only way to overcome the tragedy of climate change science. Readers might agree with our framing of this tragedy, but disagree with our assessment of options. Some may want greater detail on what a moratorium could encompass, or worry it may damage the credibility and objectivity of the scientific community. However, we question whether it's our duty to use public funds to continue to refine the state of climate change knowledge, which is unlikely to lead to the actions required, or whether a more radical approach will serve society better. We've reached a critical juncture for humanity and the planet. Given the unfolding tragedy, a moratorium on climate change research is the only responsible option for revealing and then restoring the broken science-society contract. The other two options are seductive, but offer false hope. So again, my hat is off to these scientists and to the conversation for posting this bold, really brave expression in the face of 26 years of not just inaction, but actually extraordinarily destructive and intensifying action. So I'll be putting a number of links from a few of the climate communicator series that I did last year. I'd invite you to check those out. They will help to put this into context in terms of just how much really great science communication has gone on for years, and also how much really propaganda and maladaptive science communication has also gone on from various sources. So again, those links will be in the show notes. Thank you for listening. Hope this was of some value to you, and a strong recommendation to read this article for yourself with the conversation, and perhaps sign up, subscribe with the conversation. They do a great job. So again, thanks for listening, and see you next time. Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea.
Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.